Our story unfolds in Birkenhead, United Kingdom, back in May of 2012, focusing on a 17-year-old girl named Hannah Windsor. Hannah had been dealt a rough hand early on, struggling with severe ADHD that made navigating the traditional school system a constant battle for her. Yet, socially, she was a magnet. Her sister remembers her as the absolute life of the party, a girl so charismatic she could strike up a friendship with a brick wall. She had ambitions too, attending college for dance with dreams of one day standing at the front of the class as an instructor. By February of 2012, however, her situation had deteriorated, and she was staying in a youth hostel for the homeless, though the specific events that led her there remain a mystery. What the press did confirm, though, was that she wasn't slipping through the cracks unnoticed. She was heavily involved with numerous support agencies. We're talking about a full roster of intervention, health pros, social workers, police, and housing officers, which suggests her personal life was in a state of deep crisis. In the middle of this chaos was her boyfriend, 18-year-old Adam Lewis, whom she'd met at a specialized education center for teens with behavioral challenges. Adam hailed from Morton and shared Hannah's ADHD diagnosis, but his problems ran much deeper. He was a young man plagued by severe demons. His childhood was a nightmare of profound neglect and abuse at the hands of his parents, trauma that reportedly stunted his development and left him with significant learning delays. Clinicians noted he had an extremely low IQ and a personality disorder, and from his very first days in school, it was obvious the boy was in agony. He fell behind academically, couldn't focus to save his life, and remained a social outcast who showed zero interest in bonding with other kids. Tragically, that isolation often boiled over into violence. By age 9, the courts stepped in and stripped his parents of custody because they refused to lift a finger to help him. He was shipped off to live with his grandparents, who were by all accounts saints, doing everything in their power to undo the damage inflicted during his earliest years. But it seemed the die was already cast. Adam quickly began displaying the classic, heartbreaking symptoms of a child shattered by early trauma. His impulse control was non-existent, and after failing in mainstream schooling, it became clear he needed a secure environment tailored for severe mental health struggles. By age 11, he was already lighting fires, self-harming, and numbing himself with alcohol and illegal drugs. The files describe a boy with almost no capacity to think ahead or regulate his actions, and this unmanageable behavior is what ultimately led to his transfer. That move landed him in the special needs school, where he crossed paths with Hannah Windsor, sparking a romance that kicked off around 2011. Physically, he was 18, but mentally, Adam was operating on the level of an 11-year-old. Details on their dynamic are scarce, but the signs weren't good. It appears to have been a toxic, volatile cycle of breaking up and making up, and in 2011, Adam's instability took a darker turn. On May 12th, he targeted his sister's ex-boyfriend, breaking into the man's flat and not just stealing valuables, but completely trashing the place. Adam didn't just walk away, he torched the place on his way out, lighting 2 fires that gutted the home, destroyed the furniture, and choked the property with thick smoke. His recklessness put the entire neighborhood at risk. Fire crews scrambled to the scene and managed to kill the blaze before it could claim any lives. But Adam wasn't stupid. He knew it was only a matter of time before detectives connected the arson back to him. He realized he had to vanish. He went off the grid, planning to rough it for a few nights up on Bidston Hill. He pitched a makeshift camp, packing only the bare essentials he'd need to survive. He was digging in for the long haul in those woods. Among his gear was a crucial tool, a Swiss Army knife. Once his hideout was secure, he whipped out his phone and dialed Hannah. He told her she needed to come meet him at the site, and fast. But as they talked, the conversation took a dark turn. Adam started spilling his guts, confessing every detail of the burglary and the fire to Hannah. While he was bragging, law enforcement was already hunting him down. An arrest warrant was issued almost immediately. Hannah, clearly rattled by Adam's disturbing confession, knew she couldn't keep this secret. She went straight to the station to blow the whistle on the arson and the theft. On Monday, May 14th, she sat down and put everything on the record. It was a long session with the officers. Before she left, they handed Hannah a slip of paper with a direct line to the investigators, a lifeline, just in case. They didn't mince words. Adam was a volatile, extremely dangerous man. Their advice was crystal clear. Stay far, far away from him. Tragically, Hannah ignored the warning. On Wednesday, May 16th, she hiked up to the hideout on the hill to meet Adam one last time. The exact timeline gets blurry here, but detectives have pieced together a grim theory. At some point during their meeting in the woods, Adam found out the truth. He realized Hannah had betrayed him to the cops. That little slip of paper with the detective's number? It was found later, ripped to shreds, scattered near the campsite. It seems that discovery sent Adam into a blind, murderous rage. The exact sequence of the violence that followed is something only he knows for sure. But the evidence reveals the nightmare Hannah endured. Adam attacked her, beating her into submission before binding her to a tree, taping her mouth shut, and stripping her naked. Then, the sexual violence began. The assailant inflicted severe lacerations across her torso, particularly targeting the chest area, before driving the blade deep into her thigh. In a move of pure sadism, Adam tore the embedded knife down the length of her leg to the knee, forcing the conscious victim to endure agonizing pain as she rapidly lost blood. After prolonging her suffering for hours, he produced a ligature he'd packed for the occasion and tightened it around her throat, ending her life by asphyxiation. Forensic analysis couldn't determine whether the massive blood loss or the strangulation was the primary cause of death. It remains unclear which one claimed her first. The perpetrator deliberately stretched out the assault, subjecting Hannah to a sustained period of terror. One can only imagine the absolute nightmare she was forced to endure. What she went through is beyond the realm of imagination. Once Adam was certain Hannah's heart had stopped beating, he undid the bindings, securing her to the trunk, and concealed her remains under a pile of earth and forest debris. Court records indicate that when Adam awoke the next morning, he noticed a stranger hiking through the vicinity of his campsite. He walked right up to the bystander and dropped a bone-chilling inquiry, asking exactly what sort of prison sentence a man his age might face for taking a life. We don't have a transcript of the entire exchange, but one can only assume the hiker was completely rattled by such a question. On May 18th, 2 days after the murder, a missing persons report was filed for Hannah. Coincidentally, that was the same day law enforcement caught up with Adam. Officers located him sleeping rough at a local train station. A quick run through the National Police database flagged him as a wanted man for prior incidents of arson and burglary. They placed him under arrest. At the time, he was actually sporting the very same sneakers he had stolen during his previous crime spree. The shocking part is that those shoes were stained with Hannah's blood. In a massive oversight, investigators missed this detail and released him on bail, deeming him low risk. During this interim period of freedom, the weight of his actions, or perhaps the urge to brag, caught up with him. He went to visit his sister. He unloaded the grisly details on her, confessing to the sadistic slaughter he had committed just days prior. Naturally, his sister was sickened. She didn't sit on the information. She went straight to their grandparents and relayed the horror story. Despite their shock, the grandparents didn't hesitate. They dialed emergency services instantly. Law enforcement swooped in, rearrested Adam, and demanded he reveal the location of the body. It wasn't until May 19th that they recovered Hannah's remains. The condition of the body left the seasoned investigators completely shaken. A single glance confirmed the victim had been subjected to a protracted nightmare of extreme torture. Word of the atrocity spread through the town like wildfire. The community outpouring was massive. Over 200 mourners, many clad in pink to honor Hannah, packed the venue for her funeral and vigil. Come June, detectives grilled Adam on his motive for such a vile act. His defense? He claimed she had slapped him. He alleged that this triggered a blind rage, causing him to snap. It was a clear attempt to shift the blame and paint the slaughter as some twisted form of self-defense. Forensics, however, told a different story. Adam didn't have a scratch on him to corroborate his story of being attacked. Detectives then posed a logical counterpoint. Even if she had struck him, why the systematic, prolonged torture? Why not just shove her away? When pressed with this inquiry, Adam went silent. He never offered a credible motive. However, crime scene investigators pieced together a theory based on physical evidence. They discovered a police contact card given to Hannah. It suggests Adam found it, realized she was snitching or seeking help, and exacted a brutal, betrayed revenge. Grainy security footage released to the press captures the final, haunting images of Hannah alive. In the video, she is simply walking. Minutes later, she would be bound to that tree. As the case moved to court, Adam entered his plea. Initially, he tried to plead guilty only to manslaughter, but likely after his legal team looked at the evidence, he upgraded that to a guilty plea for murder. Psychiatric evaluations painted a picture of a man with mild cognitive challenges and a severe personality disorder. The doctors noted a total absence of empathy. Despite his guilty plea, Adam claimed amnesia, stating he blacked out during the actual killing. Few buy the blackout story. The consensus is that he recalls every moment. His guilty plea, however, meant a full trial was unnecessary. This mercy at least spared Hannah's family the trauma of viewing graphic crime scene photos in court. At the hearing, the judge delivered a prepared statement. Reports state that as the judge read the condemnation, Adam stood stone-faced, showing zero emotion. The judge's words were as follows. Adam Lewis. This was a protracted, merciless assault that undoubtedly caused agonizing suffering for Hannah Windsor. Before her death, you offered no reason for your actions. You claim provocation, but a slap does not even begin to justify the misery you inflicted. The mutilation of her chest and groin points undeniably to a sexual motive. Only you know the specific sequence of horrors you put her through. It is, however, undeniable that you calculated these cruel injuries to maximize pain. You tethered her to a tree. You silenced her with tape. You sexually violated her and caused severe internal trauma. The cutting of her genitalia was a distinct, unusual cruelty, which was clearly intentional. You dragged a blade across her skin and stabbed her repeatedly. You drove the weapon through her leg, severing major arteries down to the knee and causing massive internal hemorrhage. And you did all of this while she was still breathing. The fact that Adam could listen to this list of horrors without flinching is terrifying. He was handed a life sentence with a minimum tariff of 22 years. That sentence will likely infuriate the public. 22 years seems like a slap on the wrist for such barbarism. Hannah was only 17. Her life was stolen. However, the judge clarified the nuances of this life sentence. First, release is not automatic. The 22-year mark is simply the earliest he can apply for parole. A board will then decide his fate. They determine if he is safe to walk the streets. Secondly, even if released, the life sentence remains active. He remains a prisoner of the state forever. If he violates his parole conditions at any moment, the authorities can drag him back to a cell. He can be recalled to serve prison time for as long as deemed necessary. For the sake of justice and public safety,